Welcome to The Time That Hunts You series, Episode 2, The Minute That Shouldn't Exist. Ethan did not forget what happened the night before. Some nights fade with daylight. They lose their weight once morning arrives, shrinking into something the mind can dismiss as fear or fatigue. This night did not behave that way. It stayed intact, sharp and heavy, as if it had carved itself into him rather than passed through. A minute had disappeared, not slipped past unnoticed, not misread on a faulty screen. Removed. He remembered the way the room had tightened around him, the sudden absence of sound, the unnatural pause where even his breath seemed uncertain. He remembered the messages on his phone, the certainty behind them, the way they spoke as if the event had been expected. First skip confirmed. The words carried no surprise. No doubt. Someone had been waiting for this. Ethan had not slept after that. He lay awake until morning, staring at the ceiling, listening to the fan with a suspicion that would not leave him. When dawn finally arrived, it brought light but no relief. Time had resumed, but it felt different now. At school, the world appeared unchanged. Students moved through hallways, complaining about assignments, laughing too loudly, checking their phones between classes. Teachers followed schedules with practiced indifference. Ethan noticed the mistake before anyone else did. The first bell rang late, only by a minute. No one reacted. No one questioned it. The teachers adjusted the lesson times without comment, as if the schedule had always been that way. Ethan checked his phone immediately. The time was correct. Still, his chest tightened. It happened again during second period. The teacher repeated the same sentence twice, word for word, unaware she had already said it. The class remained quiet, pens moving across pages as if nothing unusual had occurred. Ethan felt the familiar pressure behind his eyes. At lunch, a tray hit the floor before anyone remembered hearing it fall. Students looked up only after the sound had already happened, reacting too late. Small things, easy to ignore. But Ethan had learned something the night before. Small things were how it began. He started watching the clocks. Not obsessively. Quietly. Carefully. The digital display on his phone. The wall clocks in classrooms. The analog clock above the cafeteria doors. Most of the time they agreed. Occasionally, one lagged behind the others for a fraction of a second before correcting itself. Once, just once, his phone showed something impossible. 10:17. Then, for a single breath, 10:18 a.m., a letter where a number should have been. The screen corrected itself immediately. 10:18. Ethan's heart raced. That minute should not exist. Claire found him near the lockers after the final bell. She looked different. Not frightened exactly, but altered, as if she were holding herself together with care. Her movements were precise, deliberate. "You're seeing it too," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. Ethan nodded. "The repeats," she continued. "The delays. It's not just skipping anymore." "No," Ethan said. "It's leaking." Claire swallowed. "I got a message last night." Ethan stopped walking. "What did it say?" She hesitated, then spoke anyway. "It said I wasn't supposed to remember the second time." They stood there for a moment, surrounded by noise and movement, feeling separated from it by something invisible. "How many others?" Ethan asked. Claire shook her head. "I don't know, but I don't think it's just us." That night, Ethan checked his phone constantly. No messages came. The silence felt intentional. Sleep resisted him. Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds between sounds. Every creak of the house felt louder than it should have been. When he finally checked the time, his breath caught. 3:05 a.m. He sat up. He hadn't planned to stay awake. He hadn't planned anything. But his body reacted before his mind could intervene. He turned on his phone screen. 3:06 a.m. The fan hummed above him. The air felt normal. Then the sound stretched. Not stopped. Stretched like a recording slowing down. Ethan's heart began to race. The fan froze. The room tightened. But this time something else happened. The digital clock on his desk lit up. 3:07 a.m. It stayed. The minute did not vanish. It existed. Ethan felt a deep, instinctive fear. This was worse. The missing minute had been unsettling. This was something else entirely. He moved his hand. He could. He spoke his own name out loud. His voice worked, but it sounded flat, stripped of depth, as if the room were swallowing part of it. The air vibrated faintly, like a distant electrical hum. The walls felt closer than they should have been. The world had not paused. It was waiting. His phone vibrated. Unknown number. You're inside it now. Ethan's fingers trembled as another message appeared. Don't waste the minute. The clock flickered. 3:07 remained. Ethan's thoughts raced. What did that mean? What was he supposed to do? The minute felt heavy, dense, like something packed too tightly to move through naturally. Then the room exhaled violently. Sound rushed back. The fan resumed. 3:08 a.m. Ethan collapsed back onto the bed, his heart pounding so hard it hurt. That minute had not been removed. It had been revealed, and whatever controlled it now knew he was watching. Morning came too quickly. Ethan felt hollow, as if the night had taken something from him without leaving a mark. At breakfast, his parents spoke as usual, unaware of how carefully he was studying the clock on the wall. It behaved, but he no longer trusted it. At school, the mistakes grew bolder. A classroom froze for 3 seconds before resuming mid-conversation. A hallway lost all sound while students continued moving, unaware. A clock in the main office ticked backward once before correcting itself. People noticed, not fully, but enough to feel uneasy. Whispers started. Something was wrong with the schedule. The bells were off. The day felt strange. Claire met Ethan near the library. My brother said he felt like the morning repeated itself, she said. Like he lived the same 5 minutes twice. Ethan felt a chill. Time wasn't hiding anymore. It was slipping. That afternoon, Ethan's phone vibrated again. A new folder appeared on the screen. No name, no icon. Inside was a single file. A list. Times, dates, locations. All marked at 3:07. Some entries were crossed out. Others circled. Near the bottom of the list, highlighted in a way that made his stomach drop, was a name. Ethan Hale. He didn't need anyone to explain what it meant. The hunt wasn't theoretical anymore. It was personal. Ethan did not move for a long time. The house was quiet in the way it always was before dawn. But the quiet no longer felt empty. Felt occupied. He lay on his back, staring at the ceiling, listening to the fan turn above him, waiting for it to betray him again. Didn't. The sound stayed steady, stubbornly normal, as if mocking the fear coiled tightly in his chest. The minute had existed. That was what changed everything. A missing minute could be dismissed, argued away, buried beneath logic. A minute that remained, one that allowed movement, thought, awareness, was something else entirely. It suggested intention, structure, rules he didn't understand. He reached for his phone again, though he already knew what he would find. The folder was still there. No name, no icon, just a quiet certainty that it belonged. Inside, the list waited. Ethan scrolled slowly this time, forcing himself not to rush. The entries were clinical, stripped of emotion. Times, dates, locations, all marked at 3:07. Some were crossed out cleanly, decisively, as if the act had been final. Others were circled, the ink slightly darker, heavier. He stopped when he reached his own name. Ethan Hale. It wasn't circled. It wasn't crossed out. It was highlighted. He locked the phone and placed it on the desk, face down. The room felt different now, subtly rearranged by the knowledge. Not smaller, not darker, just aware. School the next day felt wrong in ways Ethan struggled to describe. Not chaotic. Not obviously broken. Misaligned. A classroom emptied too slowly after the bell rang. A teacher stared at the board for several seconds before continuing as if nothing had happened. A student insisted the clock had skipped backward during a test, laughing nervously when no one agreed. Ethan didn't laugh. He felt the same pressure behind his eyes he had felt during the frozen classroom, the same warning signal his body now recognized. Time wasn't failing all at once. It was slipping in controlled places, testing the strain. Claire met him near the library during lunch. She looked exhausted, her shoulders tight, her movements careful. When she spoke, her voice was low, as if sound itself might overhear. "My house felt wrong last night," she said. "Not at 3:07. Earlier. The lights dimmed for no reason. My phone froze on the lock screen." Ethan hesitated, then showed her the list. Her finger traced the entries silently. "My name's circled," she said. "Yes. And yours. Highlighted." Claire swallowed. "What does that mean?" Ethan didn't answer because he didn't know. But he suspected the truth was worse than any explanation he could offer. That night he prepared again. Not out of defiance. Out of necessity. If time was no longer hiding, then pretending ignorance felt dangerous. Ethan set clocks around the room. Not obsessively, but deliberately. He positioned them where he could see them without moving his head. He left the lights on. He did not want to be mistaken for asleep. At 3:04 a.m. he sat on the bed and waited. His heart beat steadily, louder than it should have been. The house creaked softly around him, familiar sounds that anchored him to reality. 3:05. Nothing happened. 3:06. The air shifted. Not tightened. Shifted, like a change in pressure before a storm. The fan slowed slightly, then steadied again. Ethan exhaled carefully, afraid sudden movement might provoke something. Then the clocks behaved strangely. They did not stop. They did not skip. They hesitated. Each one paused at a slightly different moment, like a group unsure when to speak. The second hands trembled. The digital displays flickered, not with static, but with indecision. 3:07. The minute arrived, and stayed. Ethan stood. He expected resistance. A barrier. Something to stop him. Nothing did. The room allowed movement freely, almost generously. The air hummed faintly, not loudly enough to hear, but enough to feel in his teeth. Shadows pooled in corners they hadn't occupied before. This wasn't absence. This was presence. He took a step toward the desk. Then another. The floor felt solid beneath his feet. Everything was intact, yet subtly distorted, as if reality were holding itself together with effort. His phone lit up without vibration. No message, just the screen awake, watching. Ethan felt a pressure at the back of his neck, the unmistakable sensation of attention focused directly on him. Not surveillance, not observation through devices. Awareness, the kind that knew where he was standing without needing to look. "You told me not to waste the minute," he said softly, his voice sounding thinner than usual. The phone screen dimmed. Then text appeared, slowly, as if being considered before each letter formed. "You were meant to pass through it." Ethan swallowed. "What happens if I don't?" The reply came after a pause long enough to feel deliberate. "Then the minute notices you." The air thickened slightly, not enough to suffocate, but enough to remind him that the space was no longer neutral. The clocks around the room flickered in unison, their displays briefly showing symbols Ethan couldn't read. Then the minute collapsed. Sound rushed back. The fan resumed its steady hum. The clocks snapped into alignment. 3:08 a.m. Ethan sat heavily on the bed, breath shallow, his skin prickling as if he'd brushed against something charged. This time, the messages didn't disappear. They remained on the screen. The city felt strained the next day. Not panicked. Not aware. Strained. Traffic lights lingered too long. Pedestrian signals contradicted themselves. A train arrived early enough to cause confusion and late enough to anger passengers. News reports blamed technical failures, minor system errors. Ethan recognized the pattern. Time was correcting too often now. Claire texted him just before lunch. People are starting to notice. Not enough, but they feel it. Before he could reply, another message appeared on his phone. Unknown number. You've changed how this works. Ethan's chest tightened. How? He typed. The reply came slowly. By staying awake when you should have passed through. Ethan stared at the words. What happens to the crossed-out ones? The pause that followed felt heavier than silence. Then, they stopped creating resistance. Ethan's hands shook. That night, he didn't pretend he might sleep. He sat upright on the bed, lights on, phone in hand, watching the clock approach the hour with a calm that frightened him more than panic would have. His body felt alert, ready, as if some part of him had adapted faster than his mind. 3:05. The room felt normal. 3:06. The phone screen dimmed on its own. A message appeared without notification. You're awake again. Ethan's breath caught. Another followed. That changes how we respond. The lights flickered once. The walls vibrated softly, not violently, but with intent. Ethan felt it then, unmistakably. Time was no longer correcting itself around him. It was focusing. The final message formed slowly, each word deliberate. It knows when you sleep. It knows when you forget. Now it knows you're awake on purpose. The clock hesitated. Not at 3:07. 3:06. The second hand trembled, uncertain which direction it should move. And Ethan understood, with sudden, chilling clarity, that the hunt had entered a new phase. Not correction. Pursuit.